All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. I want you to picture this. It's the dead of night. The harsh, sterile glow of computer monitors is cutting through the dark, gritty atmosphere of an office. It looks exactly like a scene straight out of a really tense psychological anime, right? Well, we are stepping back into Japan's Heisei-Era, going deep into the shadows to look at a phenomenon that left a massive, lasting scar on corporate culture. Welcome to the era when yelling was justice, and the frankly distorted success of Heisei-Era power harassment.
Okay, imagine you're in your 7th year at a development vendor. You've built up your skills, you're finally handling core projects, and you kind of feel like you understand how the business world actually works. But then your peace and quiet is completely shattered. You're hit with this jarring realization and you think, whoa, was success always this loud? It's just a visceral, super unsettling shock. The author of our source material had this exact epiphany. They realized in that single moment that success in their company wasn't being driven by some brilliant strategy. It was literally being driven by sheer volume, just echoes in the dark and intense intimidation.
Section 1. Night office dominated by yelling and the culture of power harassment sales.
So picture a famous sales manager. This guy is known everywhere for bringing in massive results. He's the undisputed rainmaker. But his methods, they are just pure chaos. He'd go out drinking with clients, come back to the office late at night, and suddenly shout, "Meeting at 11 p.m." The development directors are literally dragged from their desks, completely exhausted. And the second they sit down, the abuse just starts. Desks are kicked, documents are being violently thrown across the room. Control wasn't maintained through clear communication or logic. It was enforced through pure, suffocating pressure. And the craziest part? This wasn't just a bad day. This was the accepted culture. This was just how they operated.
This was the stark reality of the Heisei workplace, a space where volume literally equaled power and survival just meant keeping your head down and enduring the storm. Even as nice ideas like compliance and work-style reform were becoming buzzwords outside, deep in these trenches, this brutal behavior was the winning formula. By the way, if you've ever experienced a workplace where the loudest person in the room held all the power, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe to the channel as we unpack how to break this toxic cycle in today's explainer.
Moving on to Section 2, the reality where someone gets hurt and the absolute exhaustion of the bystander.
The really tragic thing about this kind of toxicity is that it doesn't just affect the person getting yelled at, it infects the entire room. Imagine the paralyzing contrast in realities here. On one side, the author was pulled in to work weekends to help put together this manager's proposals. But remarkably, their direct boss completely shielded them from the abusive meetings. They were kept safe. But on the other side is that very boss's reality. They are pushed to the absolute front lines, taking all the yelling, the thrown objects, just pure venom. There is this incredibly heavy exhaustion in knowing you are safe while your mentor is out there taking the hits in your place.
The author actually recalls a really haunting day when an object was literally thrown at their boss during one of these massive tirades. The boss eventually came back to his desk, held his head in his hands, and just did nothing. Nothing was said, just sitting silently. That back told the whole story. You honestly don't even need to hear the yelling to feel the profound impact of that moment. That silent, defeated posture, that is the real, lasting human cost of power harassment. Which brings us to Section 3. Why was power harassment allowed? Or, as we'll call it, the shield of absolute metrics.
So, this naturally leads to a really uncomfortable question. How does an organization just let this happen? How does a guy like that keep his job? Well, it boiled down to one absolute metric: sales revenue. Because this manager consistently delivered huge financial numbers, the organization basically structurally justified his behavior. The revenue was an impenetrable shield. This wasn't just a single person's character flaw, it was a massive systemic failure where the company was implicitly saying, hey, as long as you bring in the money, we're going to look the other way. And this brings us to a really complex paradox that I want you to pause and think about for a second. Was that sales manager wrong? On a human level, absolutely. It's totally indefensible. But in a highly pressurized environment where delivering results is literally the only thing that matters, terrible methods suddenly start to look right to the people in charge. If the company actively rewards the behavior with bonuses and promotions, can we really just blame the individual? Or do we have to confront the machine that built him?
Let's dive into Section 4, the chain of distorted success experiences, and what exactly gets reproduced in the next era. Let's look at how this builds into a critical macro business lesson, especially for companies trying to achieve digital transformation today. Think about the very definition of organizational culture.
Culture is stronger than systems, period. Once a specific action is intimately tied to success, an organization will inevitably reproduce it. This is exactly why so many companies completely fail to change. It does not matter how many shiny new HR policies you write up. If the underlying culture secretly believes that yelling gets results, those toxic success stories become the biggest wall to reform. The survivors of that era eventually become leaders, and they just reproduce exactly what they learned in the dark.
Speaking impartially, we really have to audit the kind of success we are allowing into our teams right now. We face a choice between two entirely different tolerated success experiences. On one side, you have the old way. Short-term results fueled entirely by fear and pressure. Sure, maybe kicking a desk gets a project done by Friday, but at what long-term cost to your talent? On the other side, you have what's absolutely required today. Long-term sustainability that is rooted deeply in trust. The real question isn't about judging the past. It's asking what kind of success your organization tolerates today. Because that specific choice dictates what's normal for the next generation.
The structural traps of the past are just painfully clear. Organizations routinely justified abuse through absolute revenue metrics. They confused fear-based pressure with actual leadership, and they allowed a toxic culture to totally overpower their compliance systems at every single turn. Building a modern, future-proof team requires completely severing this cycle. You literally have to break it. And before we discuss exactly how to redefine true strength in your own team, make sure to subscribe so you never miss our deep dives into modern business survival. Okay? Thumbs up.
All right, Section 5. What is true strength? Redefining competitive power.
Let's shift gears to the uplifting, forward-looking takeaway from our source material. It ultimately boils down to this. True strength is not a loud voice. It's a system that produces results without crushing its people. I mean, that is just beautifully put, right? A truly competitive organization, one that's actually ready to thrive in the future, relies on sustainable mechanisms. It does not rely on the volume, the ego, or the sheer terror inflicted by one single star manager. True competitive power elevates people instead of breaking them down. It builds an engine that runs smoothly in the light, not one that grinds its gears in the dark.
So how do we practically apply this tomorrow? It really comes down to 3 steps. Step 1, audit. Honestly check the behaviors currently tolerated in your team. What are you letting slide right now just because someone is a top performer? Step 2, redefine. Change what strength actually means for your organization. Shift aggressively away from pressure and move toward collaboration. And step 3, choose. Actively select a sustainable path for results. Because if you don't actively make this choice, your culture is going to inevitably default right back to those toxic shadows of the Heisei-Era.
I want to leave you with one final, really provocative question. What kind of success experiences is your organization tolerating right now? Take a close look at your own workplace tomorrow. Look at the legacy you are building today. Are you actively breaking the cycle, or are you secretly letting the loudest voice win? Think deeply about what you want your team's normal to be, and step forward differently.